Hello and welcome. My name is Amir Daniels, and this will be my narrated response for the documentary Half the Sky. So, to start out with some of the key takeaways that I had after watching this, uh, I found that this documentary was about the oppression and exploitation of women. Um, and it's not just that it's an issue, it's the way that it was framed and contextualized as not just being an issue of women and women's problems, but those issues really being symptomatic and emblematic of larger systematic and economic failings, and really just highlighting that women's issues aren't just women's issues, they're issues for everybody. And I believe the message that the audience is supposed to take away from this is that every person plays an individual role in the battle against inequality and oppression of women. Um, we all have a vested interest, and the only way this can happen is by systematically improving the conditions that women need to succeed, whether that's starting grassroots movements or funding women to help them go through school. And I think that's really the most important thing is education is the largest way for a lot of these women to improve their situations, and I think that's a key takeaway from this. So some of the emotional responses that I had from this, and this sort of ties into the part of the film that I thought delivered the message very effectively, was the scenes highlighting the sexual slavery and prostitution and brothels. I found that these scenes really struck me, and watching those, it really felt like a failing on the society as a whole, and the lack of infrastructure that would allow conditions like that to continue existing and that cycle to perpetuate itself. I find that very difficult to watch, and I think emotionally as well. It's difficult for a number of reasons, but also personally, I work with vulnerable populations of youth as well, a lot of young ladies, and in so many of the girls in the documentary, I saw these girls that I work with, and for so many people, it's just a matter of misfortune or bad luck or being born into the wrong circumstances. So that was the part that stood out the most to me emotionally. There wasn't any part of this documentary that I found particularly ineffective at getting that message across or confusing, but something I wish would have been discussed to a greater capacity is just the intersectionality of these issues, or just a wider range of issues and how they affect different people in different places among different social classes. I believe the documentary did some of this, but I would have liked more of it and a more nuanced perspective, because I think it would have offered a commentary on some of the more subtle effects and subtle ways that oppression can affect people. But I understand that that's not necessarily what this was going for, and this was highlighting a very specific instances of these inequalities and oppression, especially in these underdeveloped countries. So, some of the issues raised in the film were issues of basic human rights violations and denials, um, as well as just the generational harm and the continued cycle of abuse that is allowed to occur, and the precedent that that sets for behavior and how the law and the culture views it at large. Um, Another issue raised in this film is the negative impact of harmful stereotypes in culture and in the media, whether that's through negative roles in film and television, or even rape culture. I think this documentary highlighted that, especially you see that in some of the honor killings or just cultures that are very anti victim and aren't supportive of women who are assaulted. I think those are some of the key issues that were raised throughout this documentary. Why I would recommend this to others? I would recommend this to people because I think it's challenging and it's honestly difficult to watch at times. I think this documentary highlights the dark and ugly realities that many women have to face around the world, and it really forces the viewer to directly acknowledge it. And I believe that's important for people to see those types of things because I think it grounds us within our own reality and creates a space or allows for a chance to reassess and recontextualize our perspectives and beliefs in just how we think about oppression and our role that we play in it. And lastly, I believe that people who are predominantly patriarchal minded would be open to the message of this film if they were able to actually receive it or give it a chance. I really do believe that many of the stances and arguments presented in this film are very straightforward and relatively universal, in that I find most people would look at this and say, this is bad, this shouldn't happen, this should change. And I really do think a lot of people would find that to be the case, but it's whether they're really willing to sit down and give it the chance or even get to the point where they could see that it's something they would agree with. You know, it's tough. But yes, this is my PowerPoint on Half the Sky, and thank you for watching.